So this lesson we're going to be looking at the different ways you can represent a quadratic function. So we've talked about vertex form and we've talked about standard form. We're going to add a new one called factored form today. So on the vertex form, we're going to work a couple of the problems off of your assignment. And we're going to start with the second one down on the front page. And so when we're working with vertex form, that means we need to see we need to have A, B, C, HK. So your A comes from the number here, so -2. B is -4, number in front of your X. C is 6. We really don't need that yet, but I just want you to get in the habit of finding it. The next things you have is your H and your K. And so we're going to find HK. So to find your H, is the formula -B divided by 2A. And so another way to think of -B is opposite B. So the opposite of -4 is +4 divided by 2 times -2. So 4 divided by -4 gives me a -1. So my H value is -1. My K value, I find it by replacing all my x's with that -1 we just found. And so when I do that, square there. -1 squared is +1. So -2 times +1 gives me -2. -4 times -1 gives me a +4. And I have +6. And when I combine that all together, I end up with 8. So my K value is equal to 8. So that's my HK. That tells me my vertex. My vertex is at -1, 8. And so when I go to graph it, that's going to be the plot a point. So if you want to go ahead and go over to your graph at the very end, you can go ahead and plot that point. But that doesn't answer the question. The question asked me for vertex form. So this is not vertex form. That's our vertex. Vertex form is f of x equals you're going to do a times x minus h squared plus k. So my a is -2. X, remember this is going to be kind of like the opposite of h. So +1 squared, and then my 8 gets added to the end. And so this is your vertex form. But you use that to help find your vertex. So the purpose of vertex form is to help you find your vertex and easily graph. Now let's look at the next one. We want to look at factored form. So again, you're going to go back to your original equation. So for us, that was f of x equals -2x squared plus, so let me look and see. If it was plus or minus 4x. Plus 6. And so anytime your A is negative, you always have a GCF that is going to be negative. So if this is negative, you have a negative here. And then if I look and see what number divides into 2, 4, and 6, well, the number that divides into all three of those is negative 2. So I'm going to divide all by negative 2. And so my GCF is negative 2 in front of what we have left. So x squared plus 2x minus 3. And that's equal to your f of x. And so the next thing we want to do is you have a trinomial, so that means when you factor it, you take the top part, negative 3x squared, and the bottom is 2x for the middle. What can multiply to give me negative 3? They would add to give me 2, and that would be a positive 3x and a negative 1x. And so I have x plus 3, x minus 1, with that GCF hanging out in the front. And so f of x is equal to a negative 2, x plus 3, x minus 1. And so that is your factored form. But the factored form is to help you find out what your different roots are. So we're going to use this to help us discover my roots. So you're going to make a little chart. In this chart, you're going to take and replace each column with one of the pieces or factors up at the top. And how much work you show me in each of these columns is up to you. Negative 2 equals 0. That can't happen, so that one's not usable. X plus 3 equals 0. Well, that's going to happen whenever x equals negative 3. X minus 1 equals 0. That's going to happen when x equals 1. So when we plot our two x-intercepts, we have negative 3 and a positive 1. And then our vertex was at negative 1, 8. And so when I graphed this parabola, it would be a downward facing parabola. Going down from there. And so next one we're going to do the top one on the back. So if you look at that one, we are going from what's given to us is our vertex form. And we have to go back to standard form. And so here's vertex form, which in this form we can find our vertex, which is going to be at 1, 3. But we need to find the standard form, which means we need to multiply this out and distribute the 3 and then combine like terms. So when I do that, we're going to take and multiply it out using the box, but this time we're going to go outside in. So you're going to fill in the factors on the outside and go inwards. And just a reminder, this is the same thing as negative 3, x minus 1, x minus 1. And so our two factors are x minus 1 and x minus 1. And then that plus 3. And so we're going to figure out what that would multiply to become. And so x times x is x squared. a x times -1 gives us negative x. A -1 times x gives us a negative x. And so that gives us that second spot. And then the last one we have to find is going to be that -1 times -1, which is a +1. So that +1 gets written down. The x squared gets written down. And what we have in the middle is what happens when you combine these two terms. So negative x minus x, which gives us negative 2x. And that +3 just gets written down. Distributing that -3 to all three parts gives us a negative 3x squared minus 6x minus 3. And then we bring that +3 down from the previous because it's just hasn't been used yet. When we combine like terms here, the x's can't combine, but our constants can, canceling out. And so our standard form is negative 3x squared minus 6x. And that gives you your standard form. Once you have your standard form, you can go to the factored form. And so we're going to next go into our factored form from our standard form. So our standard form was f of x equals a negative 3x squared plus 6x. We're going to look for a GCF, because you always start with looking for a GCF, especially if your a is not 1. And our negative 3x can go into both pieces, because our a is negative, we're going to put this as negative. There's x in both pieces, so that's the reason there's an x there. Negative 3x, negative 3x, and that negative 3x gets written down in front of my parenthesis, leaving inside my parenthesis, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1, x squared divided by x is x. Positive 6 divided by negative 3 is negative 2, x divided by x is canceled out. And so my factored form is f of x equals a negative 3x times x plus minus 2. And so this is going to help me find my two different roots, or my two x-intercepts. And so I set each of those equal to 0. I have a negative 3x and a x minus 2. When I set these equal to 0, and so to solve this, I would need to divide both sides by negative 3. And so x is equal to 0. I would need to add the 2. And so x is equal to 2. So those are my two x-intercepts. So I'm going to go over to my graph and plot each of those pieces. And so to start off with, at 0 and at 2, we had our 2 times across, and then our vertex was at 1, 3. My parabola goes down from there. And that's it for what we did today. You need to finish up the rest of the packet, as all the rest of those problems are what you're responsible for the quiz tomorrow.